After New Year's brunch, I got a notification. My card was charged $3,500 for everyone's gifts. My aunt said, "You don't have a family of your own, so it's only right you cover the rest of us." I just nodded and said, "Sure, this will be the last time." The next morning, my payment was reversed, their group trip was canceled, and my uncle's credit card was declined at the pharmacy. I, 32M, thought I had finally found my place in this family after years of being the outsider. The notification that popped up on my phone during New Year's brunch changed everything. The morning started like any other family gathering at my aunt's house. The same faces around the same table, the same forced conversations about work and weather. I sat at the edge of the dining room, picking at my eggs Benedict while my cousins talked about their kids' soccer games and dance recitals. My uncle dominated the conversation as usual, gesturing wildly with his fork while describing his latest business venture. My phone buzzed against my leg. A credit card alert. $3,500 charged to my account at some high-end department store. My stomach dropped. I hadn't made any purchases that morning. I excused myself to the bathroom and called my bank. The representative confirmed the charge was legitimate, processed just 20 minutes ago. The merchant was listed as the same store where my family had been shopping for New Year's gifts the day before. I specifically remembered staying home, claiming I had work to catch up on. When I returned to the table, my aunt was distributing wrapped packages to everyone. Expensive-looking bags from designer stores. My cousins were unwrapping jewelry, electronics, and luxury items that easily totaled thousands of dollars. The pieces started falling into place. My aunt noticed my confused expression and pulled me aside to the kitchen. She explained that she had used my card information to cover the remaining balance for everyone's gifts. She had gotten my card details from my wallet when I left it on the counter during Christmas dinner last week. Her tone was matter-of-fact, as if she was explaining something obvious. She told me that since I didn't have a wife or children of my own, it only made sense that I should contribute more to the family. After all, everyone else had mouths to feed and college funds to worry about. I was just one person with a good job and no real responsibilities. She said it was only right that I cover the rest of them. I stood there in her granite countertop kitchen, watching her rinse dishes like she hadn't just admitted to stealing from me. The casual way she dismissed my life, my choices, my financial autonomy hit me harder than the actual theft. I had spent years trying to prove I belonged in this family, attending every gathering, sending birthday cards, being the reliable nephew who never caused drama. I walked back to the dining room where my family was admiring their new gifts. My uncle was showing off her expensive watch, my cousins were comparing their new handbags, and their kids were already playing with tablets that cost more than my monthly car payment. All purchased with my money, without my knowledge or consent. My aunt returned and asked if everything was okay. I told her it was fine, that I understood her reasoning. I said this would be the last time, and she smiled and patted my shoulder like I was a good boy who had finally learned his lesson. The drive home was a blur. I sat in my apartment that evening, staring at my bank statement and feeling something shift inside me. For years, I had been the family ATM without realizing it. The nephew who always picked up dinner checks, who loaned money that never got repaid, who bought expensive Christmas gifts while receiving gift cards to chain restaurants in return. I spent the night researching. Credit card fraud, even by family members, was still fraud. I had documentation, bank records, and witnesses to the conversation. But more importantly, I had access to information they didn't know I possessed. See, my uncle had made me the emergency contact on several of his accounts after his heart attack 2 years ago. He needed someone responsible to handle things if something happened to him, and I was the obvious choice since I worked in finance. What he forgot was that I still had access to his credit monitoring services and some of his account information. The next morning, I called my credit card company and reported the charges as fraudulent. I explained that someone had used my card without permission and that I had never authorized the purchases. The representative was sympathetic and immediately reversed the charges. She also flagged my account for additional security and issued me a new card. Then I made a few more calls. I contacted the travel agency that had booked my family's upcoming group trip to Hawaii. My uncle had put the deposit on his credit card, but had been planning to ask me to cover the balance, as usual. I informed them that there might be issues with payment and suggested they confirm all charges immediately. Next, I reached out to my uncle's credit monitoring service. As his emergency contact, I reported suspicious activity on his accounts and requested that additional security measures be put in place. This would flag any large purchases and require additional verification. My phone started ringing around noon. My aunt was frantic, explaining that the department store was demanding the return of all the merchandise since the payment had been reversed. She asked if there had been some mistake with my card. I told her there was no mistake, that I had reported the unauthorized charges to my bank as required by law. She tried to argue that it was a family matter, not a legal issue. I reminded her that using someone's credit card without permission was fraud, regardless of family relationships. I suggested she contact her lawyer if she disagreed with my assessment. My uncle called an hour later. His voice was strained as he explained that his credit card had been declined at the pharmacy where he was trying to pick up his heart medication. The bank had frozen his account pending a security review. He asked if I knew anything about it. I told him that I had reported some suspicious activity as his emergency contact, which was my responsibility according to the paperwork he had signed. I suggested he contact his bank to resolve the issue, though these security reviews typically took several business days to complete. The travel agency called him next. They needed immediate payment for the Hawaii trip or they would have to cancel the reservations. With his credit frozen and my card no longer available, the family vacation was effectively dead in the water. Update 1. The fallout was swift and brutal. My aunt showed up at my apartment that evening, demanding I fix the situation. She was no longer the composed woman from Brunch. Her face was red, her voice shaking as she accused me of destroying the family over money. I let her vent for 10 minutes before calmly explaining that I hadn't destroyed anything. I had simply protected myself from theft and fulfilled my legal obligations as my uncle's emergency contact. If she felt that constituting an attack on the family, perhaps she should reconsider her own actions. She threatened to turn the whole family against me. I told her that was her choice, but she should be prepared to explain why she thought stealing from family members was acceptable behavior. I also mentioned that I had documented everything, including her admission of guilt, in case legal action became necessary. My uncle's situation got worse. The security review revealed several irregularities in his spending patterns, mostly related to the expensive gifts and travel bookings. The bank required him to provide documentation for all recent large purchases. Since many of them had been intended to be paid for with my money, he couldn't justify the expenses against his actual income. His credit score took a hit. The frozen accounts triggered late payment notifications on his other cards. His mortgage company received alerts about potential financial instability. The man who had spent years lecturing me about fiscal responsibility was suddenly facing a financial crisis of his own making. The Hawaii trip wasn't just canceled. The family lost their deposits because they couldn't provide alternative payment within the required time frame. Thousands of dollars down the drain, along with months of planning and anticipation. My cousins started calling, trying to play mediator. They suggested I was overreacting, that families should stick together, that money wasn't worth destroying relationships. I asked each of them if they would be comfortable with me using their credit cards without permission to buy myself expensive gifts. The conversations ended quickly after that. Update 2. 3 weeks later, my uncle had a second heart attack. Not severe, but enough to land him in the hospital for observation. My aunt called me, sobbing, begging me to help with the medical bills since his credit was still frozen and their insurance had high deductibles. I visited him in the hospital. He looked smaller in that bed, older than his 62 years. He asked me to help them, not as family, but as a business arrangement. He offered to pay interest, to sign legal documents, to do whatever I required. I told him I would consider it, but first we needed to address the elephant in the room. He needed to acknowledge what had happened and take responsibility for his family's actions. He also needed to understand that our relationship had fundamentally changed. He was quiet for a long time before admitting that my aunt had been taking advantage of my generosity for years. He said he had known about some of it, but had convinced himself it was harmless because I seemed able to afford it. He apologized, not just for the credit card incident, but for years of treating me like a resource rather than a person. I agreed to help with the medical bills, but with conditions. I would loan them the money at market interest rates, with a formal repayment schedule and legal documentation. If they defaulted, I would pursue collection through the courts. This wasn't family helping family anymore. This was a business transaction. My aunt was furious about the terms, but my uncle accepted them immediately. He understood that trust, once broken, had to be rebuilt through actions, not words. The loan documents were signed within a week. I had my lawyer draft everything to ensure there were no ambiguities. The first payment was due in 30 days, and every payment thereafter would be automatically deducted from my uncle's checking account. Update 3. 6 months have passed since New Year's brunch. The family dynamics have completely shifted. My aunt barely speaks to me at gatherings, and when she does, it's with cold politeness. My uncle has been making his payments on time and has actually started treating me with genuine respect rather than casual dismissal. My cousins have split into camps. Half think I went too far, that family should forgive and forget. The other half have started questioning their own financial relationships with their parents and have discovered they've been taken advantage of as well. The most interesting development came from my youngest cousin, who pulled me aside at Easter dinner. She told me that my aunt had been using her college fund to cover household expenses for years, always promising to pay it back. Seeing how I handled my situation gave her the courage to confront her mother about it. My uncle's credit has mostly recovered, though he's much more careful about his spending now. The security review forced him to create an actual budget for the first time in his adult life. Ironically, his financial situation is more stable now than it was before the incident. The Hawaii trip was eventually rescheduled for the following year, but I wasn't invited. I wasn't hurt by the exclusion, I was relieved. I used the money I would have spent on that trip to take my first solo vacation to Japan. It was the best 2 weeks of my life. My aunt made one last attempt at reconciliation during Thanksgiving. She approached me privately and suggested we put the whole incident behind us. She said family was more important than money and that holding grudges was unhealthy. I told her she was absolutely right, that family was more important than money. That's exactly why her actions had been so devastating. She had chosen money over family when she decided to steal from me. She had chosen money over family when she dismissed my life as less valuable than theirs. I was simply responding to the precedent she had established. She asked what it would take for me to forgive her. I told her that forgiveness wasn't something she could negotiate or purchase. It would come when she demonstrated genuine understanding of what she had done and why it was wrong. So far, she had only shown anger at being caught and frustration at facing consequences. The conversation ended there, and we haven't spoken privately since. I still attend family gatherings, but my role has fundamentally changed. I'm no longer the reliable nephew who can be counted on to cover unexpected expenses or pick up checks. I'm polite, present, and completely unavailable as a financial resource. Some family members have accused me of being cold or calculating. They're not wrong. I learned that being warm and generous with people who don't respect you is just another form of self-harm. I choose to protect myself now, even if it makes family dinners more awkward. The strangest part is that I'm happier now than I've been in years. Setting boundaries, even painful ones, has freed me from a dynamic that was slowly destroying my self-worth. I no longer dread family gatherings or worry about hidden financial expectations. My uncle and I have developed an odd but functional relationship. He respects the boundaries I've set and has stopped treating me like a walking ATM. We actually have real conversations now about work and life and things that matter. It's not the warm family bond one once wanted, but it's honest, and that's worth more than I realized. The loan will be paid off in 18 months. After that, we'll see what kind of relationship, if any, we can build. But it will be built on mutual respect rather than financial exploitation, and that feels like a victory worth celebrating. Sometimes the best revenge isn't dramatic or explosive. Sometimes it's simply refusing to be taken advantage of anymore and watching people face the natural consequences of their choices. My family learned that I wasn't the pushover they thought I was, and I learned that I didn't need their approval to have value. That notification on New Year's morning was the best thing that ever happened to me. It showed me exactly where I stood with these people and gave me the motivation to change my position. I'm no longer the family ATM, and I've never been happier to be broke of that particular job.